I have a correspondence here from your department to the Department of Health. It's dated on the 20th of November, and in it says, as you know, in the past we voiced serious concerns in relation to governance of the Children's Hospital project and were assured that the arrangements in place were sufficient and robust. What serious concerns did you have? And if you had serious concerns, what measures did you put in place to make sure that those concerns could be allayed?
So, between 2012 and spring of 2017, we had significant discussion with the Department of Health and the HSE in relation to this project, the optionality of this project, the costs involved, and critically the governance structure. And I think the emails, the correspondence, or at least the timeline for those discussions have been set out in the public domain. So we raised issues around the governance of this because of the complexity of it, and we want to ensure that whoever was given responsibility for managing this, the sponsoring agency, had the necessary expertise, and that led to the decision to set up the Children's Board, which was full of people with very significant experience, most from the private sector, experience of dealing with large projects. Tom Costello, who chaired the board, worked, I think, for CISC for 30 years in Ireland and elsewhere, and other people on the board had a whole variety of qualifications that were relevant for this. So the discussions, we had discussions about governance, because we were concerned about governance. We wanted to make sure there was absolute clarity around what body was the sponsoring entity and what body was the sanctioning authority and would manage the oversight of this on a daily basis on behalf of the government. So that's where our concerns, and we raise those concerns consistently. When the government memo, and I'm not allowed to talk about government memos because they're covered by other procedures, but the government memo of 2017, I think the Minister for Health and Secretary have set this out, set out the governance structure, and at that side we were satisfied that the governance structure could deliver this project. We had consistently raised issues around the cost long before my time. Like, this is a project that has been running for 20 years, 30 years. In 2012 we had the issue in relation to the Matter site, and then there was a decision that which the Planning Commission was refused, and then we went back to the drawing board, and then I think it was Minister Riley at the time, he came forward then with a review of the different options, and it was decided that it would be co-located with James's and off and running. So we had significant issues about the cost of this project, issues around the project, how we manage given its scale, and we had made those comments known and those concerns known to the department, and they'd been set out in observations on memos consistently during that period.
So you still didn't have a mechanism in place whereby overruns would be identified and reported to yourself as Director General of the Department of Expenditure?
So the procedure for spending is to relate the actual spending to the profile, and for us to be alerted to any variance. This is different because it was prospective spending as opposed to actual spending. And I've already set out in relation to questions earlier about the two-stage process and how that was managed and how we got to this situation.
Did you think the two-stage process was the right one to do then? Did you stood over that, did you?
So, as I mentioned in relation to the questions earlier, the Government Construction Contracts Committee had a debate with the National Children's Board over a long period of time, 18 months, 2 years, David, where they discussed the merits of this approach. And a derogation was sought and a derogation was given to move away from the lump sum contract. But the lump sum contract, if the counterfactual, if the alternative to the two-stage process was the lump sum contract, it's not clear, and I don't think anybody in this room is saying it's clear, but it's not clear that we would have delivered this hospital faster or cheaper in a better way, which would have satisfied concerns that people now have. Like, it's not clear to my mind at that stage that, like, the lump sum contract, to say that we would have been in a position to set out the detailed design required to have a competitive competition for a lump sum contract, I just don't think that would have happened. I don't think we would have attracted contractors who would have been taken on board that risk.
So do you think
given the inevitable uncertainty around the two-stage process? Now, I think the issue here is about the way that two-stage process was managed. I don't think the decision for a two-stage process was the wrong decision, but I think there are issues in how that managed, and there are lessons that we know for the future. And there are other projects that have been developed, very significant projects for the state, where there will be very significant challenges in terms of finalising a design and when that design will be put to market.
But has the two-stage process been used for any other projects within this state?
So there have been there's the Dunkettle interchange is a two-stage process also. And
has that been successfully delivered?
I don't have the details. David, you want to?
Sorry. It's
starting. Yeah.
Sorry, the mic. Do I turn it on? Yeah, sorry, yeah, there it is. The Dunkettle is an early contractor involvement, two-stage contract, but it's slightly different in that the works that are being undertaken are purely investigative works, and the contractor is engaged purely with their, if you like, their management and construction expertise to feed into the design and the de-risking of that particular project. So it's not exactly the same as the Children's Hospital, the approach. Yeah. So it's working to a GMP for the project, but there isn't works being undertaken as such at the moment.
You see, when you use a process and a methodology like that and it comes in with such a shocking overrun, surely it must say to you that this is the wrong model to be used. You know.
Yeah, no, look, certainly nobody is going to say that this has worked out. Nobody's going to say this has worked out according to plan. That's clearly not the case. This hasn't worked out. The government were given a view as to how much this would cost in spring 2017, and it's 400 million more now than the government were told. So clearly that's not tenable position. Well, the question though, and I'm not being in any way evasive here because we're having a debate and discussion, and I don't know the answer to this, but I don't think any of us should believe that an alternative lump sum contract or some variant of that would necessarily have built this project cheaper. That's what I'm saying. Maybe it would have done.
Do you think it might have been dearer then?
I just don't know.
Do you think it might have been more expensive than the most expensive hospital in the world?
I just don't. I think it's the second most expensive hospital in the world.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, that's what I'm told anyway. But I don't know that we can say with certainty that the counterfactual is necessarily better. I don't think we can say that.
What's the most expensive hospital in the world then?
There's one in Helsinki, was it? Stockholm. Thank you, David. Stockholm.
Stockholm.
Oh, man.
So are we using that as a measure of success?
No,
there's one more expensive.
No, of course we're not. Of course we're not. No, but I think.
And how many beds does that have? The one in Helsinki? Is it the same number of beds?
I don't know.
Well, you see, you can't then. You can't. It is twice as many beds. Yeah.
Onto the Treasury in Sweden.
You can't. No, I
but the point I'm making, though, Deputy, is that the point I'm making, though, is that I don't think we can say that the two-stage process per se has led to this. The implementation of this particular two-stage process, of course, has led to these difficulties. And as far as I can see, there are two problems which I mentioned to Deputy Doherty. There are two issues: committing to significant preliminary works, which in fact then tie the government into completing a project on that site without us knowing the final tender. That's the issue. And secondly, that the approximate bill of quantities was not in any way consistent, ultimately what we were told it would be in spring 2017.
So who's responsible for that? And I would say the contractor again. See, for people looking, there's a couple of issues for them. Obviously the governance, where you had serious concerns, not just concerns, not just kind of general governance observations, whatever, but serious concerns. And you have a number of people within your department who, look, solely just monitor the health budget and what's spent on health. And yet, nobody knew what was happening. And that's the worrying thing. So nobody in your department knew what was happening. Even though going back to the 20th of October, in 2017, where you had the 40 million overrun, like 40 million is a lot of money in that instance. And nobody, how many people have you within your department that monitor health spending?
So we've many, not enough it would seem, given our record, but so not enough, but so I think the issue is there was a significant debate which I've set out, and I'm in danger of repeating myself here. Significant issues were raised repeatedly with the Department of Health in the run-up to the decision in 2017. It was our understanding that we had a final tender price which was going to be close to the final bill here, and that turned out not to be the case. And I've set out why I think that is, and David is the expert, will confirm this. We have to learn lessons from it, and it has implications for how we manage projects. Like Deputy, like I haven't spent the last 8 weeks in terms of longer since this issue came, amongst the other challenges that we face. You know, who did what, when, how. What I've been working with Minister, because that's what I was asked to do, is to set out what this means for the delivery of this facility, what it means for the capital allocations for next year.
But are you satisfied now?
And then just let me, and then see what issues does it mean for the public spending code and procurement. And what I've tried to do here, like I haven't come into this committee with my hands down on my side saying, oh, there's nothing to see here, there are no lessons, and there's nothing. I haven't said that. I've actually set out, and apologies, a long contribution to the issues that I think this raises for public policy. And these aren't in any way trivial issues. Like if we do things differently in the future, it means it's going to take us longer to do projects, because we're going to have to spend an awful lot more time and money in getting detailed designs, and we won't go through a process where we have this two-stage approach. So it does raise fundamental issues for us in terms of how we manage projects, which people here will be grappling with in the future, no doubt.
Yeah, but surely, surely the basic thing, like having the design right, so it can match up to the bill of quantities, like it's just so minor. Like, and in the learning that you're talking about, the government will no longer pre-commit to major bespoke projects until it's 100% clarity on tendered costs. I mean, how can you tender for something?
So, like what we're saying, in effect,
how can you put something out to tender when you don't know the design?
Like in the past, like clearly a lump sum contract, there's a very detailed design set out, and contractors will price it based on the detailed design. And what happens, can happen, is that there's then an adversarial relationship, and there's a lot of discussion about price variation, where the contractor would say, "Oh, you said you wanted windows like that, or you want that number of windows. In actual fact, we needed X number of windows, and therefore we're going to argue that it wasn't us, it was the design." So there's endless discussions about the extent to which even the detailed design matches up with the ultimate requirements of the client, what's been delivered by the contractor. What we are saying clearly is for the state, and it doesn't relate to building a school because they're the same, or a primary care, the things that we repeat time and time again, we know what we're doing. But when it comes to projects that are unique, we need to spend the learning from us here, and we're obviously here to advise the Minister and the Government, but our learning is that we need to spend much more time on the detailed design before we can commit that design to tender, and that will increase cost certainty, we believe, but it will come at a cost, because it's going to take an awful lot more time and money to develop the detailed design, particularly for one-stop projects.
But then at least you'll know what you're doing. It's impossible for people to understand why a design spec couldn't have been done for a project of this size, and I think it failed. We're just meeting departments all the time now. There's a cost. There's a cost to this. There's a cost in cutbacks, things that people don't have now because of the mistakes that were made. And I'm not convinced from you here today that the communication mechanisms are in place with your department and the other departments to ensure that overruns and governance issues aren't reported to you that will have a major impact on you in terms of your budget planning. I'm just not convinced from what you've said today that there has been sufficient learning here, and it concerns me that there's a normalising of what happened.
I'm not going to get into an argument here, because I'm in good form today after Man United winning last night. I'm in good form. I'm not going to get into an argument, but I didn't for one moment suggest that this is. I didn't. Yeah, it wouldn't be great, but I'm not normalising this at all. I don't know why we put words in our mouth. I'm not normalising it.
I'm just giving you my perspective.
I'm trying to contextualise the reality of what we're dealing with. That's what I'm trying to contextualise. I'm not normalising it. I'm not suggesting this is normal. It's not normal, and we hope this is not going to repeat it for other projects. But I'm trying to give context for the challenge that the Department of Health and the relevant authorities have.
Just a yes or no. Should you have been notified earlier?
So I've answered that question before. nothing
Yes,
further to
you should
in
have.
relation to that. I've answered the question before in relation to Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Senator.
Thank you,
We've been asked to take a break, so I'm going to break for 10 minutes.